Maple Namu. Hello, and welcome back, or for the first time, to the Maple Namu Podcast. My name is Chris, and in this episode, I'm going to talk about how communication is dirty. When we're speaking, we try for perfection. I mean, when we study another language and we're learning the grammar, we're taught this is the perfect way to do it. And it's kind of not going to happen. I mean, we try for perfection, but in a real world situation, you're never going to get there. If you did, people would tell you talked like a book. I see it all the time, all kinds of grammar mistakes. I make all kinds of grammar mistakes. I hear all kinds of grammar mistakes. And since I started this podcast, I've been transcribing everything I say by hand. I listen to it at about 40% speed and type along listening to my drunken self rambling and making all kinds of grammatical errors. Every episode, almost every sentence has something that you could argue is incorrect. And I'm a native speaker and I'm mangling my own language. But at the same time, if they're errors, or, well, actually, if it's the way I talk, is it really an error? That's something to think about. There's this idea that, your grammar, there's a certain grammar and it has to be perfect. And if it's not like that, it's a mistake. But if people are using it in that way, wouldn't that be part of the language and therefore not a mistake? But the more you get into studying and the higher level you get, you realize that everything is just an argument. It's not really a set rule. And once you realize that you can kind of make any argument you want, the idea of having a perfect or proper way to do things kind of goes out the window. Most people will never master a foreign language. Some people can get pretty good, but to actually be a master is really difficult. Even true bilinguals will struggle to be perfect in two languages. It's possible, don't get me wrong, but realistically, it's not an easy thing. But the good news is, depending on your goals, you don't need to master. You can get by just fine with just a little bit. I mean, I make tons of mistakes in my Korean when I'm talking to teachers or students or going out and doing something, but I'm reasonably happy with my level because I can get what I want done. I mean, like I said in the previous episode, I need to study more, but I do okay. And just today we had an example where I went to a hardware store and this guy knows me. I've been a bunch of times and we generally do okay, but I had to explain I needed to buy a pipe that can go under our road and be driven on by a car. And he's like, you need this one. I'm like, well, I already have this thing. Can I do this and this? And he's like, no, I don't think that's a good idea. I think you need this other one. And we just went back and forth and it took about 15, 20 minutes of dealing with me. And eventually I got what I wanted and he made a sale. But if you were to really record the things that we said, I made tons of mistakes. I have no idea how to say things. Chances are he made some mistakes too. If we were to actually count, I would definitely make a lot more. But if you were to look at a microscope, we both did. We made things that would be against the grammar, but we were communicating, and it's kind of a magical thing, really. And I wouldn't say that they are mistakes in the biggest sense, because if people are using it that way and people are understanding, maybe it's not really a mistake. I mean, that's how language changes. My wife and I talk about this a lot. Her English is good in a lot of ways, and in other ways, she would say that it isn't. I think she's really good, but she's really good at communicating what she wants to say with a few words. She doesn't use that many. She doesn't learn new words. But with what she's got, we do pretty well. And I'm the same way in Korean. I know enough to kind of do what I need to do when I need to do it, but I need more, or I should study. And I'm working on that a little bit. I think she would be proud of me at the hardware store, but she never gets to see that kind of thing because if she's there, we'll just talk through her rather than her watching me struggle. But we'll see. Language changes, though. I mean, that's one of the characteristics of a language. If it didn't change, the language is dead. We should kind of think of language and communicating as like a living thing, kind of. I mean, it changes to suit its needs, to suit its environment. Some of the first like languages are born by communicating. Basically, the need to communicate. They're called pidgins. And what a pidgin is it's a language that is made between two other languages, usually for trade, and then it becomes a Creole. It becomes a pidgin with native speakers. And that's something that happens naturally. So maybe I'm just creating this English-Korean pidgin, and it's changing, but probably not. But if we look at communication, it's definitely changing, and while it might not be perfect, it can still be kind of beautiful. Even if you don't know all the words and you don't know exactly what you're trying to say, you can do a lot with a little, which is nice. So, if you are listening to this and you're not a native speaker or you don't have too many people to talk to, I would say get out there, communicate, use what you have. I mean, you can do an awful lot with body language and just a few words. You'd be surprised. Maybe you can go to a hardware store and buy some pipe, or marry someone from another country and live with them and survive and somehow make it through quarantine without arguing. Or you could write a comment telling me if you enjoyed this podcast or if you didn't enjoy it. But that's all for today, and have a good day.